Good morning, everyone. Welcome to day 2 of the EOSC Future Open Days. I see some people that I saw yesterday, but a lot of new names and new faces as well. Yesterday, for those who weren't there, we had a look at the EOSC portal that we're building from the user side. So we had a look at the front office, the services and the data that will be in there and what users would be able to get out of it. We discussed the science projects that are part of the EOSC Future project, and we also discussed how stakeholders in EOSC, whether that's people who have been working on EOSC and have known EOSC for years, can get involved, but also for people that completely new, what they can do to help make the EOSC that we're building better, more solid, and easier to use. Today, we're looking at the EOSC platform that we're building from different angles. We're getting started this morning with a talk about the EOSC platform for providers, talking afterwards about the EOSC DIH business pilots, and then ending with a talk on the EOSC Observatory. So starting with the platform for providers, we have 2 speakers for you who are both working on this aspect of EOSC. First, we have Paolo Manghi, who's the CTO of OpenAir, and he's our work package leader on the work package 4, which is focusing on providers and services for providers. And with him is Bartosz Wilk, who is responsible for management of services in this work package. I'm shortly going to hand the floor to them. First, I wanted to mention that if you have a question, rather than posting them to the chat, we prefer that you post them through Slido. So there's a link here that you can follow, or you can go to slido.com, use the code that's here, or scan the QR code. And no worries if you've missed that as soon as I give the floor to Paolo, because we will be posting the link to the chat as well. So I'm wishing you all a very pleasant session. I'm sure it will be very interesting. Paolo, over to you.
Thank you very much. Let me start sharing my screen. Okay, I hope you can see everything. Okay, thanks for the introduction. So let's get started. The first thing that I'd like to mention is the fact that what you've seen so far, even in the previous day, about the EOSC and the EOSC core spins across the issues of technologies, but also communication and dissemination. So here we are focusing a lot on the core aspects of the EOSC. So the EOSC, as we see it, we are trying to start so many months of consolidation and collaboration with scientists, is an EOSC that has a very thin layer at the center that enables interactions across providers and the resources they manage in a way that is engaging and having implications or efforts on the providers only when it comes to getting a benefit out of it. Okay, so that's the most important thing to remember. So not so many obligations, and any kind of action that you do to integrate with the EOSC will be corresponding to a benefit that you will get out of it. So as a first step, we think of the EOSC as an enabler, mainly. So how can providers across different research infrastructures, different clusters, even in a long tail of science, share their resources in a way that they are discoverable, that they can get benefits such as monitoring or composability of these resources, getting out statistics, and monitoring science as a whole, right? So while they are evolving in their own domain, they'd like to know how they're connected to other domains and how they evolve together. So the first act as a provider, when we are in the EOSC ecosystem, is the one of sharing. So sharing here, which translates into onboarding, this is a term that you will find all over the place in the EOSC ecosystem, means to be able to describe your resources in a way that is harmonized as much as possible with how the other providers, even not in your own domain, are doing, in a way that preserves as much as possible the information that is required to reuse these resources, so to find them and possible to combine them. And of course, this is a process that cannot be top down. We cannot just impose things, but we have to build it together in many ways. So when a provider acts as a provider in the context of the EOS core, shares its own resources, services, data, software, and these may turn out to be more than that in the future. When a provider instead acts as a consumer, takes advantage of what has been shared so far. And so we have a number of services that are built around this notion of this map of resources that we have built, which will be stored in a service called the catalog, the EOS resource catalog. We offer a number of services that provide added value on top of that, from the ordering of resources, the composability, the statistics, and so on. And this is what we're going to present today. So I will start starting from the very first step ahead that we have identified in the EOS future with respect to the past, which is the fact that we moved from an EOS that was mainly focusing on services to an EOS that instead is taking into account resources. So we started introducing new kinds of resources into the EOS on top of the services, as you will see the research products as we name them, but many more can be added in the future, depending on what we'd like to model in such a way that we can expose what we have and others can find it. So providers as a whole can be organizations, institutions, even groups of those, offer resources. What are EOS resources today? The first kind, which you've heard about, thanks to the EOS Hub, EOS Finance, and so on, are services. So services can be intended in many ways. But the idea is that they are active agents out there. So they can be thematic services, they can be services for storage. You can classify them in different ways, depending on how you visualize them or picture them in this huge architecture that is science. So they can be horizontal, as we like to name them, which means they can be used across different disciplines, or they can be extremely vertical, so thematic services, whose functions and functionalities are useful to scientists doing something very, very specific to their own domain. There is a special class of these services, which we call data sources or content sources, that are there to store the results of science. And by results of science, we mean, of course, research data. We mean research software. We can also mean very specific objects to some domains, like a protein could be stored somewhere in the life science. And of course, it includes the traditional publication. We have plenty of sources out there that are being used by scientists to share their own narratives, their own text. On top of this, we have added the research products. So the actual products stored into one of these services, stored, preserved, deposited, described in order to be shared with others. And here by research product, we mean the data sets, so the research data, so digital objects that are there, that are passive, mainly passive, used to be processed, to be analyzed, and to represent information or observational data, or whatever is out there. We mean software. Well, software is again code that can be compiled, interpreted, but an object that is needs to be enacted, and typically it becomes, or it spawns a service or something like a process that operates on data. And then we have the publications, and the publications can be of several kinds, and of course include the article, the journal article, the conference article, but it could go beyond, like technical reports and any sort of stuff. Plus more complex objects like the FDOs or the research objects that can be found out there. So combination or aggregation of objects which together means something special, for example, a workflow or whatever. So this is how we're trying to model the universe today. The classes of research products that we have identified were mainly identified in the previous projects of OpenAIRE Advanced, and are the ones that today are most common across sources. Of course, we may come up with other classes in the future if we find they have a critical mass and they're worth a special description. An important aspect that we're going to introduce in the future is the interoperability frameworks. So I'm not going into the detail today of what these are, but an interoperability framework is basically a mechanism or like a protocol or a metadata schema that can be used to share data, to access data. And it's very important to know, for example, which of these interoperability frameworks, which include standards from community standards to other kinds, okay, how these are connected to the resources. So to give an example, is this service capable of exposing data or metadata according to this format? Is this service capable of being part of a workflow, Galaxy workflow? Is this research product that we have here compatible with this kind of metadata format, and so on? This information is extremely important. In order to attach it to the resources, we need to, of course, track it down. So to give it an identity, to describe it, to come up with common models. There are solutions already out there. And the EOSC Future is moving in this direction. So trying to, first of all, identify what the frameworks are, have an office that allows the communities to bring in their frameworks so that they can tag and mark services resources based on such frameworks, and offer, therefore, a catalog that allows the browsing of these objects, so the moving from a resource to another, thanks to the fact they are connected, but also thanks to the fact that they are compatible to the very same frameworks. This empowers the catalog and the EOSC core thin layer of the simple ability of composing resources, because you can build the infrastructure that is necessary to design orchestrators, which can find resources based on their compatibility levels or degrees, and decide what to do based on how deeply these interoperability frameworks are described. So the catalog. How to onboard your services and resources. Today, the catalog is conceived as a graph, conceptually. So we have resources that are connected with each other based on several semantic relationships obtained by the combination of the OpenAir results and the EOSC Enhance and EOSC Hub results. So the service catalog and the research product catalog together. When you bring these two services into the same domain, conceptually, you're building a graph where services can be connected to products. Products are already connected between them. They're connected in turn to providers, so to organizations, connected to funders of several kinds. So the ability of discovering and accessing these resources is also based on the ability of collecting information of how these are related with each other. How to onboard? Well, we have rules of participation, which were established in previous projects and that are constantly being updated. So communities can contribute to further refine them, change them, propose changes, and let them evolve based on the expectations of science in general. So this means that further rules of participation can be included. Today, the OpenAir guidelines, for example, are based on known standards such as DataCite, Dublin Core, JATS, known in the scholarly communication domain. But we are including already some new guidelines that are specific to the communities, like the bioschemas.org, which will basically broaden up the ability of the catalog to bring in resources based on community needs. So without asking the communities to come to the catalog in a way. And of course, a good balance of rules of participation, so efforts on the side of the EOSC core and an effort of the communities to comply to these guidelines is needed and needs to be thought together. So this is why we have an office, which is for package 3, which builds around the interoperability frameworks, everything that is needed to make this flow going seamlessly, let's say. The onboarding can take place in several ways, which I'll describe later on, but requires the providers to comply to certain guidelines or protocols. They can include their catalogs, so their services and the research products into the EOSC resource catalogs automatically, building workflows that collect data and keep it up to date as much as possible. Or in the case of services, this can take place also manually. Okay, so in this case, the EOSC resource catalog acts as a sort of registry where for the first time a service is registered and, let's say, described for the others, for the world to be found. Once we build this catalog, of course, we offer it to the world. And this is done via APIs, open APIs, via dumps as well. So those who want to can download the dumps and access all this information and do whatever they want with it, from data analysis or build their own catalog, enrich their own catalog if they want. And today we're offering this also via UIs. So the marketplace will be updated to include the research products, the recommendation systems based on the research products, but also other services will be able to show what's inside the catalog, as I mentioned before, as these will be open APIs. Today, we already have a quite solid, let's say, critical mass, registering more than 300 services, including all the known sets of publications and data sets out there, collected from around 100,000 resources, different kinds, data sources, including journals, of course, scientific journals. And this is all open and free for you to access. Now, what are the added values of this? Today, we have organized communities, which typically, like research infrastructures, which typically have built based on consensus their own technology, their own community portals, their own catalogs. This is where they build their science. So this is where they know where to store their research products, where they know what they are, where they have very specific and detailed descriptions of what these objects are, which are oriented to the way they perform science. So this is where I share and find whatever I need. And not only is where I develop my science, I implement it thanks to the mathematics services and so on. Now, on the EOS side, so the EOS platform, we have actually built a comprehensive resource catalog that is connected to those. So the research infrastructures will be able to share what they have and bring it to the catalog. On the other way around, instead, vice versa, the catalogs will be able, thanks to the APIs and thanks to the availability of data, to enrich their own local catalog with resources they may not be aware of, that may span across somebody else's catalog, for example, another research infrastructure. And the interesting aspect, I think, is that this will be possible also thanks to the interoperability framework. So searching for resources that are potentially of interest to my community because they comply to certain frameworks or because they have certain features I wasn't aware of. And this could be services or products, okay? So it would be, say in a figurative way, the EOS will start of work as a pipeline or a plumbing system through which information can flow from different places, and thanks to the common agreements that we have on the onboarding. Then other communities, of course, even those who don't have today a research infrastructure, can start building their community portals using the EOS platform and taking advantage of the resources and the availability of these from other research infrastructures. So we have plenty of sciences out there that are in fact not clearly placed into one research infrastructure or another, but they work across environmental sciences, so things that are in between different domains. So these may build their own community portals, taking advantage of this combination of things. And from there, move to the research infrastructures where will they find the actual resources they need. And others may be forming, right? So other communities may be emerging thanks to that, thanks to the fact that they find everything in one place. Moreover, the idea of the catalog of being a place where the whole science is being described together with, as you will see, statistics or monitoring and combination of things, brings science in Europe, but of course that goes beyond Europe because these catalogs include services that are used not only by European sciences and research products that have not only been produced by European scientists, allows the whole block of science to be available to third-party services in the scholarly communication. Not to mention the EC participant portal, which today already finds, and tomorrow we'll find even more all the information that is needed for reporting, for statistics, analysis, to build the vision in one place. Infrastructures like ORCID can take advantage of this. So you have one place where you can find all your products, all your scientific results, and align your ORCID profile with it. And Scopus is already using today some of these services to complete the picture, for example, from the research data side, as they are very focused on the publication. And SMEs in general, anyway, can exploit that. So it's really a gateway to the market, as we see, and to the companies out there, where they will be able to find most of the information in one place, and then jump in where actually it's becoming more specific and juicy. Now, in moving from service providers to resource providers, of course, we have several things to do. What I'm describing here today is the service catalog and onboarding process, which probably you've heard of many times in the past. So the idea is that via web forms, via APIs, you can describe your service and initiate your onboarding process. This is when you do it manually. So the idea is to make it a user-friendly process. Behind, there is a workflow of double checking and controls, checking that several criteria apply, that is needed in order for a service to go through and enter the EOSC vault, let's say. It's extremely important, therefore, to interact with the onboarding team to specify, to reply to some of the questions. Because again, it's not that Amazon can register to the EOSC service registry. So some criteria are being adopted, and these need to be verified and double verified. And in some cases, not so easy and not so trivial to understand what is eligible and what is not. Once you're in, of course, you can get many information and insights about your resources. You can get the status of onboarding, you can get the status and monitoring of your activities. And that, of course, depends on the level of integration of your service with the EOSC added value services that we have. We will tell you about in a minute. Of course, it doesn't have to be manual. So if you are a community and you have your catalog, you can follow steps of interoperability through APIs. So you should be able to export your profiles according to the service description template and integrate with the service registry. And this action is based also on delegation, SLAs, clear understanding of how this data flow should take place. And we'll make sure that the local catalog is constantly up to date with the EOSC service catalog. A very similar process will be applied also for the, is applied, in fact, also for the research products. So by connecting to the OpenAir Provide, you will be able to perform very similar activities. So register your data source, make sure your data source includes research products that are compatible to given guidelines. And when this is the case, the objects, so the metadata of your objects, your research data, your research software will be part of the EOSC resource catalog. Now, I'm leaving the floor now to Bartosz. I'm not sure how we should proceed if we take questions in the end, but I think this will be the case.
Maybe let's keep the questions till the end.
Okay, Bartosz, go ahead.
I'm going to present the added value of other core services like monitoring, accounting, order management, and help desk. Paolo, could you move on? Yeah. So what changes in the EOSC Future is basically the paradigm shift, because EOSC core services were known to support delivery of the EOSC core, and support professional operation of the services in the EOSC core. But what EOSC Future is aiming for is transferring the added value for not only EOSC core providers, but also to include EOSC exchange providers. So based on the description of these 4 services, I will focus on what they bring to the providers coming from EOSC exchange. Follow, please move on. So as you can imagine, building a monitoring service for such a complex environment is not a easy task. So that this task doesn't start from scratch. All the EOSC core services are building upon results from the previous projects, mainly EOSC Hub, OpenAir Advanced, EOSC Enhance. And EOSC core monitoring service is a service based on the Argo platform, which proved to work in times of EOSC Hub operation. And the service provides the providers with knowledge about service statuses, availability and reliability, so how the services behave over time, and if the maintenance periods are happening within planned time frame, and also allows to receive notifications about services when they're unavailable and their monitoring probes return failures. EOSC monitoring not only provides us with the status of the service, but performs system tests. So it's prepared for introducing some basic feature analysis of the given service to make sure that the service is performing well. The Argo monitoring service is integrated with EOSC core service level monitoring framework, so it provides to the EOSC core a way to validate the service level agreements between the EOSC core providers, and it's proven to work for such environment proficiently. In scope of EOSC Future, we will be running more EOSC core services. So in scope of EOSC core monitoring, the next steps will be to integrate more and new EOSC core services that come to the infrastructure, as well as monitor their functionalities and find out if they are not regressing over time. What is really important is the mentioned paradigm shift. So the offer from the monitoring service to the exchange providers, and basically the same set of functions will be available to the providers coming from EOSC exchange. On top of that, the service will be integrated with marketplace to display monitoring data for the end users, with the provider portal to display monitoring data in the place where they used to work when they were onboarding, as well as provide some quality metrics for the recommender system to be able to guess which services are worth recommending. Paul, please go on. Similar challenge happens to a service accounting. So a service that collects usage of the infrastructure, which has been proven to work for high throughput computing, as well as some more metrics are introduced to indicate values of accounting for infrastructure as a service based cloud virtual machines, hypervisors, storage space providers, and dataset providers. By using a messaging system, the service transfers monitoring of the usage to the central source, and allows to measure how the resources are consumed, and the top level goal of this journey is to get to the point when we will be able to also, on top of the accounting, provide some functions to manage capacity of the services. During the EOSC Future, the main goal for the accounting service is to provide support for virtual access, so a reimbursement method promoted by European Commission. It will be also integrated with the EOSC marketplace. EOSC research product accounting is another take on the same problem, but while service accounting is focusing on services and making sure we can account services for the usage of the computing and storage resources, research product accounting lets us find out how much, how many downloads and how many views are how popular resources are by collecting metrics in a federated system of content providers. So that the service collects metrics, and for the providers add a value to evaluate the success of their own platform, and on the top level it provides worldwide indicators. So it's also, as you can imagine, important for the end users. Currently, the EOSC research product accounting is a service operating under infrastructure of OpenAir, and it will be merged with the EOSC core infrastructure to also provide added value for both providers and the end users, so the researchers. The accounting of research products work in two ways. It can either push or pull the metrics. So as you can imagine, there are many integration options that allow to indicate the consumption of or downloads and views of these resources in many ways. The content providers are asked to either report their usage tracking to Matomo Analytics or Platform API, or are allowed to or are able to reuse generic log parser. All the data coming from the content providers is being anonymized, so the user data that is it should be kept private is made private. Paulo, please move on. EOSC Order Management is a service allowing EOSC exchange providers and provider communities to attract, support, and serve the EOSC users. So by integrating EOSC Order Management, exchange providers give the EOSC users an invited channel to discover, access, and order resources from the EOSC marketplace. Several order management interoperability patterns are available for the providers to be used, or for catalog providers to be used. Both scenarios are implemented. The easiest way is to integrate or to use a ready service with no adoption cost, called Service Order Management Backoffice, which is made available for all of the EOSC providers and provides user interface to manage resource orders. The only integration cost is to provide an email which allows consumers of the orders to open and manage the resources. And there are some more integration options as an on-premise Jira integration. A reference adapter is available for the providers to prepare a tailor-made or community tailor-made order management system integration for a single provider or for a whole community of providers. With the use of the REST API or a reference Python client, but a reference adapter gives us a proof of concept implementation or a reference on how to start integrating. The system supports custom order processing workflows, so many methods of processing the orders are available for the providers as well as the end users, because all of the information about order processing is also passed to the end users. There are several ways to manage offering technical parameters using API client or a dedicated user interface in the EOSC marketplace, as well as the system brings multi-provider resource composition support by providing inter-provider communication mechanism. Also, EOSC portal operations team supports the end users in their EOSC journey, so provides additional support and expertise when they are interacting with EOSC marketplace, which for providers is an added value in terms of customer relationship management, because there is always someone to talk to when they are approaching the EOSC portal. Of course, the orders can be processed by the providers, but at least there's someone to talk to. The evolution of the order management services is based on the integration of virtual access support and other procurement models, integrating EOSC accounting for services and secure authority exchange between the system and the providers. Paolo, you can move on. Yeah, EOSC Help Desk has been established in EOSC Hub and is currently supporting most of the EOSC core services. Both the platform and the more important operational procedures has been set up based on the EOSC Hub service management system process, and it's offering for the users a possibility to submit requests about technical issues, ask questions, open tickets, and monitor the progress. It allows for notifying the end users, and for the providers, it's a ticketing system with an organization of support unit management and multiple integrated scenarios of the use. What happens in EOSC Future? Paolo, you can move on. Is the reinvention of the technology behind the help desk. So the current XGAS platform will be replaced with a fast and modern user interface that is up to date. And in the first quarter of 2022, we will be able to access new interfaces of the EOSC core, and more importantly, exchange help desk, because the service that has been delivered to support issue reporting and incident requests for the EOSC core systems will be also a catch-all service that can be used by providers that don't have their own procedures in their own community. So it will allow to bring some of the service management practices to providers that are missing this part in their current environment. Paolo, you can move on. I believe this is all from my side. I hope that this presentation was valuable for you, and that we could indicate some of the directions in which EOSC Future will evolve.
Hi, everyone. But let's move on to some questions then. I see that there's several questions that have been upvoted in Slido. Someone asked whether you can give a practical example of the differences between services and resources.
So resources includes, a service is a resource, like a product is a resource. We needed a generic term to indicate anything that can be referred to in the context of the EOSC. So this is why we use the general term resources. Resources are things that you can take, handle, access, share, and so on. Among these, you have services and you have research products. You may have more in the future, like facilities, like getting to a specific description of computing or storage. So this is a model that, of course, can be extended, is due to be extended.
So a good practical example would be comparing some service to some software. These are completely different.
Yeah, but in this case, I just tried to mention, so the difference between a service and the resource is just the fact that they are two different levels. It's like, say, fruits and apples and bananas. A service is an apple and fruit is a resource. So conceptually, resource is a term, generic term, that alone doesn't mean anything. Is an object with an identity and a description. Then we need to decide what the resources are, what we are willing to handle and to describe and point to. And we decided to have services and products in the beginning, because these are the main, let's say, items of exchange in the community. But of course, repeating myself, this is doomed to evolve in the future.
Okay, I hope that makes it clearer. If not, don't hesitate to ask your follow-up question in Slido, and then we can get back to this. Another question that is quite popular is whether you could show or have, or maybe are preparing a step-by-step guide to onboarding a community catalog, whether that's a service catalog or a data catalog.
I replied to this question with a couple of pointers, one for the services and one for the research products. There are services out there that offer this kind of guidance, which are the entry points, the gateways for the onboarding of both kinds of resources. So I replied to the question on Slido. I'm not sure it's useful to say the web address here, but
maybe if you could put that in the chat.
Yes.
But I think that it is hello, this is Mark van der Zanden. I'm also involved in the onboarding. This may be good to say that there are two different procedures for onboarding services into the marketplace, and for onboarding data, which is slightly different. And even the data sources can be onboarded as services within the marketplace, but making the data available goes through another way, so that the data is harvested by, for example, OpenAir, the Explorer, and via this way the data is made discoverable.
Okay, again, I hope that makes everything clearer. If not, please follow up. And someone is asking a bit of a cheeky question, which is, why should a community or research infrastructure provide assets and metadata? So I think, Bartosz, it's time for your sales pitch.
Yeah, of course. I believe that it's in our mutual interest and in the assumptions for the open science promotion. By bringing our community data sets and our own resources to the broader community of EOSC, we are giving the EOSC something that we have, but on the other hand, we can take something from others. So this is a mutual exchange, and this is probably why the part of the platform was called that way, because it's preliminary for the added value of open science.
Okay, I also see a raised hand. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to continue on what Bartos says. There is a misconception that EOSC is an infrastructure that will do everything for you. That's a really, really bad misconception. EOSC is a community that is trying to bring together existing resources, be that services, research products that exist out there in communities. If we all contribute to EOSC, we will have a more valuable and more usable environment where we can do research. That's the whole point, right? EOSC is not going to give an answer to everything. EOSC is trying to make us collaborate together so that we can share our resources, be that services, be that bananas, be that apples.
Definitely agree. And if I can add on that is to reassure in a way. So research infrastructures have a very good reason to exist. Okay, so we're not saying here that now we should do things somewhere else. Here, what we're trying to do is a very simple thing that I think any scientist should do. Share what we have, trying to understand what we can learn from others, and also try to understand what we can optimize in a way in terms of efforts. So we may be able, thanks to the years, to learn that my neighbor does things that are very interesting to me, but I don't yet know because I live in my, of course, silo. And that's a very common behavior. I do it myself. So the idea is to somehow break these mechanisms and build something that is lives on top, so that allows us to collaborate cross-disciplinary, but also cross-organization, cross-X in general, cross-star, I would say. So the idea of sitting together and discuss interoperability framework, for example, to showcase, for example, how in the community we are behaving, and trying to find out if other communities are behaving the same, and if there is anything that we can do together. It's an exercise that will be enabled by the EOSC that today cannot be done unless we have bilateral agreements. But that's not building an infrastructure again. So yes, I think that closes the circle on what my colleagues have said.
Yeah, I think it does. I think there's also a question that nicely follows on that, which is you mentioned that it's about bringing communities together and seeing where there's a potential to collaborate. Someone is wondering how you would deal with the complexity of very community-specific metadata.
That's the idea. So metadata has a good reason to exist. Again, in many cases, it does. In other cases, it does not, for example. So the opportunity to sit down and discuss these things is provided by the EOSC again. So whenever we come up with a new metadata format, there must be a good reason for that. So if we find out what others are doing, we may not come up with a new one, but rather reuse what is being proposed by others. So again, we are building an environment where we can finally see what others are doing and share it, hopefully, in a way that is profitable and easily consumable from us. That's the idea. And it's a long way down the road. So we're not saying we're establishing new formats. We're not saying we are building bridges from format to formats, but we're saying we're building an infrastructure where this can take place when it makes sense, okay? Rather than being built on individual efforts without anybody else to know.
There's two questions that I would like to group. Someone is asking what kind of catalogs can be registered, and then someone else asked whether you can give a specific example or a typical example of how a specific service can be included in the service catalog. So I think what kinds of services and resources can be onboarded, and how does a specific one look in a specific service?
Bartos?
Yeah, maybe I will start from answering the second question and then give the floor to you to present kinds of catalogs that can be registered, because Paulo is much more proficient in that area. So to register a service in the EOSC catalog, you should follow the onboarding rules that can be accessed in the EOSC portal. As a service provider, you are able to register your service when you conform to the rules of participation for services. The other way of doing this is more suitable for established communities that already know what to do to register service. They will be linking their catalogs with EOSC resource catalog in order to bring their resources to the EOSC catalog. And in that case, you should probably follow the path in your own community, and then only the community should make sure that the rules of participation are enforced for the whole catalog of services, and the catalog owner can take some of the hard work to assess quality from the teams gathered around the EOSC portal. The second scenario is a one that will be investigated closely in the EOSC Future, because in EOSC Enhance we ran a pilot use case with the NIFOS project, just to prove a concept of integrating catalog in an automatic way and via APIs without registration for each providers directly in the EOSC portal. But this case will be generalized, and based on that, interoperability guidelines and participation rules will be updated. I hope this answers the...
Someone asked a follow-up question saying that it's about an entire catalog, but I think you covered that, Bartosz. So if it's not, let us know. And then Paulo, can you give an example?
Yeah, maybe one comment at the end is that when you take a look at the EOSC profiles and their evolution, the newest version contains a new profile for a catalog of resources. So there will be a implementation behind the notion of catalog, and there is a ready profile that needs to be implemented in scope of in the beginning of EOSC Future.
See, Kostas, again, do you have something to add?
Yes, as since I'm part of work package 6, which is the onboarding process, I would like to add that the main goal here is that in order to onboard a catalog, you need to follow the similar or more strict rules of participation. And that implies that there needs to be some kind of formal agreement between the community that wants to onboard their catalog and the EOSC association, which is in this case is represented by the EOSC Future project when it comes to onboarding. The idea here is that now in essence, we want to build the trust between us, that you follow the same rules and the same principles, so that you onboard the services that are of equal quality to what the EPO team does within EOSC Future.
What I can add on top of what Kostas and Bartosz said is how resource product catalogs are included. In general, a data source itself is a container of metadata describing the underlying product, so the research data or the software, or again, the publications. Many data sources are hybrid. Some communities already have their own catalog, which is aggregating metadata from different data sources as such. So in this case, repositories and aggregators, let's say, follow a very similar path. They need to expose the metadata according to standard profiles. Again, these are described by the OpenAir guidelines today and are being expanded, but they're based on standards. So if your data source today is DataCite compliant, for example, well, if it's DataCite DOI'd, it's already into the graph, so it's already available in the catalog. But of course, it can become DataCite compliant, and in this case, it's possible to collect the information from it. And that holds for the individual data source as well as for the aggregators of sources. In this case, it's very appreciated if the aggregator can expose the IDs to the original sources, so we can keep track of the whole, let's say, flow of the data from the original source to the aggregator and so on. This is something we are tracking, of course, as part of the information, the provenance information. In general, the process is well described. So you register your data source, you have validation mechanisms that allow you to collect the data, validate and get feedback on how to make it fully compliant, if you use the correct vocabularies and dates, etc. You get a message describing where you fail in that sense, so you can fix it. And once you're ready, you get through the whole process of ingestion. That's the idea. It's similar but different, of course, to the service onboarding of the catalogs, because these are different beasts, right? So different animals behind. I see a question on the size of the data, etc. Let me remind you that we are collecting metadata. We're not collecting the research data, of course. This doesn't make sense from the EOSC perspective. The data should stay, and the research data, as well as any other product, should stay where it's worth it stays for scientific reasons. So we are not recollecting it. The only case where we collect the products, the original product, is to create a copy on top of which performing full text mining, AI, machine learning, whatever we have behind to enrich the information that we have. But that, of course, today only for publications, open access publications.
Then would I be right in thinking that there are no limits in what you can connect, and that we would be very happy to see large volumes coming in? Yes. So, I mean, the sky's the limit in this case. Then there's a few questions that were more related to specific disciplines. I saw someone ask here whether the structure of EOSC could be comparable to Europeana. And someone else asked whether there's specific disciplinary contacts for different science branches. You don't know whether...
I take the Europeana. I worked for Europeana for a long time. Yes, the effort is very similar. In fact, there's one thing that I loved about Europeana. Of course, others I love less, as usual, you know. But the one thing that I liked was the hierarchical structure they built, based on a common understanding of how to describe the objects. Of course, scientists were complaining that a lot of semantics, a lot of information got lost on the way of this normalization process. But what I liked is that they had these organizations into communities. Each community has to build its own catalog and expose the data according to the same format so that we could build a common portal. Now, I'm not here to judge if that worked for Europeana, because cultural heritage is a very, very complex domain. And probably the variety there was the main question mark. But I think in Europe, we should do the same for building this kind of catalogs. And this is already taking place, because many countries are building their own graphs. So their own CRIS systems, where they're trying to collect data, publications, software. And it's extremely useful to have these kind of activities there, and to have somewhere centrally, like the EOSC catalog, where we can collect all this information and then analyze it all together. And for that, again, we need to sit down and understand how to exchange the information, trying to align it, trying to lose the minimum information as possible, etc. And this is a process that is already ongoing. So I think we are quite mature, but can improve a lot in the future. We have already use cases going on. Finland is an extremely nice example that we have, where they're building these kinds of graph, and we're trying to integrate it today with your graph to get benefits from each other. Because of course, when you have the whole thing, you can return to the local graphs something they don't have, and vice versa. The local graphs are highly curated with respect to what you can do centrally, and so on. Again, it's open science on the way.
Then maybe if there are dedicated contacts for research infrastructures for different areas, could you put that into the chat? There's a last question I want to get to. We will not be able to cover everything as we need to wrap up. But since we have the CTO of OpenAir here, I thought we'd take the question. Is there any project running now at EOSC? There's a lot, we're one of them. And then could we use EOSC to build a framework with open data and OpenAir integration? That seems like a question for you, Paolo.
Not sure I fully understand it, but yes. So the EOSC is today, as Bartosz was saying, it's constituted by a number of services that are being put together and need to be glued. So we are in the first year and we're gluing them. So next year, already month 18, we'll have many of these gluing fully implemented. So today we already have the service catalog, we already have the research product catalog, and these are usable, and they are already used by not only by institutions, but by research infrastructures, by companies who are taking advantage of this. So together we can do a lot. So recently we had an interaction, for example, with Narcis. They were asking why some of their objects were not part of the graph, or not they were part of the graph, but they were not correctly tagged. So this is the kind of interaction that we have to establish, users of the infrastructure that enable the perfection of the infrastructure. So yes, this is already running. So we have several projects, several initiatives on the way, and there will be many more.
Catherine, if I can ask you to return to the question about monitoring, because I think that this might be missing from my presentation. So who decides which subjects are monitored? So I take it as a question about service monitoring. And I will reply in more general. All the services of EOSC Core that offer the value for the exchange are giving this value based on the onboarding of services or research products in case of, for example, research product accounting. This should be seen as an optional added value on top of onboarding, and the onboarding should be the first step to reach the functionalities.
Okay, unfortunately, I think that's all we have time for. But I posted a message in the chat with a link where you can contact us. So if you feel that your question hasn't been answered or you have other pressing questions, you can contact info@eoscfuture.eu, and then we will dispatch your question to the person within our consortium who's best placed to help. So that's where we'll leave it for now. We'll be back in half an hour with another session for today on the DIH business pilots. So I'm hoping to see you then or later on during the week. Have a very nice day, everyone.